Blackhead prevention works best when it is gentle, steady, and realistic, because blackheads usually do not appear all at once but tend to form gradually as excess oil, dead skin cells, sunscreen residue, makeup, sweat, and everyday surface debris collect inside the opening of the pore and slowly create a compact plug that darkens after exposure to air. So the most effective long-term approach is not to attack the skin with force, but to keep the skin calm, clean, balanced, and less congested over time. A simple routine is often more helpful than an aggressive one. Cleanse the face in the morning and again at night with a mild cleanser and lukewarm water, because very hot water can strip the skin, leave it feeling tight and reactive, and create that frustrating cycle in which the face feels oily and uncomfortable at the same time. Use clean fingertips rather than rough washcloths, harsh scrubs, gritty exfoliants, stiff cleansing brushes, or repeated friction, especially around the nose, chin, and forehead, where blackheads often gather most easily. If sunscreen, makeup, or heavier skin products have been worn during the day, remove them thoroughly but gently in the evening so residue does not remain on the skin overnight. Choose non-comedogenic products when possible, and be cautious with very heavy oils, greasy balms, thick styling creams, or pomades that can migrate from the hairline onto the forehead and temples. Moisturizer still matters even if the skin feels oily, because over-cleansed or dehydrated skin can become irritated and unbalanced, and a light moisturizer often helps the skin feel calmer and more comfortable over time. Daily sunscreen also matters, because protecting the skin from too much sun supports overall skin health and reduces the temptation to overuse strong products out of frustration. Small hygiene habits matter too. Change pillowcases regularly, use clean towels, wipe down eyeglasses and phone screens, and try not to rest the face in the hands for long periods. If you sweat after exercise, yard work, commuting, warm weather, or a long day outdoors, rinse or cleanse the skin as soon as practical, so sweat, oil, and residue do not sit on the surface longer than necessary. If scalp oil tends to move onto the forehead, wash the hair regularly and keep heavier hair products away from facial skin whenever possible. Some people benefit from gentle leave-on ingredients, such as salicylic acid, to help keep pores clearer over time, and some do well with a retinoid if their skin tolerates it, but stronger is not always better, and steady use is usually more helpful than jumping from one harsh trend to another every few days. Pore strips may remove some surface debris temporarily, but they do not stop future blackheads from forming by themselves, and repeated rough use can irritate sensitive skin, so it is usually wiser to focus on steady daily habits instead of chasing quick fixes. Avoid squeezing, scraping, pinching, or picking at blackheads, because that can cause redness, swelling, irritation, broken skin, and lingering marks while doing little to prevent the next clogged pore from forming. It also helps not to examine the face too aggressively in magnifying mirrors, because normal skin texture can begin to feel like a crisis, when it is really just part of being human. Wash hats, pillowcases, and anything that rests against the forehead regularly. Keep makeup brushes and sponges cleaner than many people remember to do. Be thoughtful with thick or greasy products that stay on the face for many hours, especially in warm weather. Try not to switch products constantly out of frustration, because skin often responds better to calm consistency than to panic. If a new product burns, stings strongly, or leaves the skin much redder, drier, or more uncomfortable, reduce it or stop it and return to a simpler routine. Regular sleep, a balanced routine, lower stress where possible, enough water, and patient habits support general well-being and may also help the complexion look steadier. If clogged pores become painful, inflamed, widespread, or resistant to gentle home care, guidance from a licensed dermatologist is much wiser than escalating with rough self-treatment. In the long run, blackhead prevention usually comes from mild cleansing, thoughtful product choices, less friction, cleaner habits, and enough patience to let the routine work quietly. And perhaps that is one reason older people often appreciate practical advice in the first place, because after enough years, most people discover that very few things improve because somebody attacks them dramatically, while a surprising number improve because somebody calm notices what matters, keeps things simple, and refuses to let a perfectly manageable inconvenience turn into a full public circus which is exactly what happened in the little Illinois town of Ashbury Falls on the first bright Saturday in October, when 79-year-old Helen Margaret Doyle put on her oatmeal-colored cardigan, pinned a brooch shaped like a leaf to the collar, tucked peppermints and a folded tissue into her handbag, and boarded the Silver Pines Senior Shuttle, expecting nothing more exciting than an apple butter luncheon at the County Cultural Center, where she assumed there would be soft music, careful soup, and perhaps one very long explanation of preserving jars from a woman named Donna, but instead found herself serving as the accidental general of the most cheerful disaster the town had seen in years after the Cultural Center somehow ended up hosting, at the very same hour, a senior luncheon, a regional scarecrow contest, a vintage cookbook swap, a children's barnyard sing-along, and a business mixer for local insurance agents. All because the events calendar had been copied from the prior autumn, the dates had been shifted by one row during editing, and nobody in the office had enough humility to ask a 60-year-old church secretary whether the final version made even one bit of common sense. Helen Margaret had spent 38 years as the front office secretary at Ashbury Falls Junior High, which meant she trusted labels, lists, backup pens, practical shoes, and women who carried tissues more than she trusted optimism, decorative arrows, or any person who said, "It should be fine," while standing beside a folding table. She lived in a neat brick bungalow with green shutters, one shaded porch swing, 2 mums in galvanized buckets, and a freezer containing 1 emergency meatloaf, 1 emergency pound cake, and several soups labeled in thick black marker, because supper, in her opinion, should never require guesswork. She was widowed, but not lonely in the dramatic storybook sense. She had a son in Street, Louis, a daughter in Louisville, 4 grandchildren, who still called her to ask how long to bake things they absolutely should know by now, a church with a casserole culture so disciplined it could have managed small government, and 3 close friends who met her every Saturday morning at Luann's Diner for coffee, eggs, and the serious public service of noticing local nonsense before it got into the newspaper. Those friends were Bonnie Ray Collins, age 74, retired beauty salon owner, loyal to coral lipstick, good scarves, and the principle that a woman's posture should never apologize for the room. Walter Dean Henshaw, age 81, retired hardware store manager, suspicious of weak furniture, decorative wagons, and all rolling objects with ambition. And Eloise May Turner, age 76, widowed, former church pianist, soft-spoken and dryly funny, with the gift of saying something so mildly that the full force of it arrived 3 seconds later and left a whole table laughing. The Senior Center flyer had promised a peaceful fall heritage luncheon at the County Cultural Center with apple butter biscuits, warm cider, local history displays, and a seasonal atmosphere. That phrase alone should have made Helen careful, because atmosphere is what people create when they have not thought through chairs. At breakfast, Walter held up the flyer and frowned. "This lower corner says family sing-along at 11:30. Bonnie Ray dabbed at her lipstick and said, "That can still be civilized." Eloise turned the page over and found the rest. Scarecrow judging at noon, cookbook exchange all morning, and local business hospitality networking in the East Hall. She took a sip of coffee. That is not one event. That is 6 women on separate phone chains. By the time the shuttle reached the Cultural Center parking lot, the proof was dancing in front of them. On the lawn stood a row of scarecrows dressed as a dentist, a beekeeper, a baseball umpire, and what appeared to be Dolly Parton, if Dolly Parton had been filled with straw and mild confusion. A white tent on one side displayed crockpots, recipe cards, pie tins, and stacks of church cookbooks. Another tent on the far edge had pastel balloons, a sponsor banner for Midwest family coverage, and a coffee table draped in blue cloth. Near the front steps, a woman in overalls was herding 6 children toward a hay bale stage, while a man tuned a guitar beside a painted plywood cow. "No," said Walter at once. Bonnie Ray adjusted her scarf and said, "That insurance tent has already blocked the shade." Eloise looked toward the doorway and said, "And someone has set pumpkins on the stairs." We are beginning with symbolism and risk. Before the bus had even fully parked, a young man in a burgundy polo and headset came hurrying over with the exact expression of someone who had spent the last hour trying to smile professionally while his day caught fire around him. "Thank heavens," he said. "The senior comfort reviewers are here." Helen stepped down carefully. "The what?" The Guest Access Advisory Panel, he said, already holding out lanyards. I'm Spencer, Community Events Coordinator. County Outreach said you were coming to help us evaluate seating comfort, line flow, noise spillover, food access, shade, restrooms, and audience movement. And if that's true, then my prayers have finally been answered. Helen tried once because she was raised correctly. I think you have mistaken us for someone else. Spencer nodded too quickly to be useful. Yes, several people have mistaken several things today, and that is exactly why I'm so relieved you're here. Then he placed a laminated badge around her neck that read, Guest Comfort Review, and did the same to Bonnie Ray, Walter, and Eloise, before Truth could sit down and unpack. Once inside the Cultural Center foyer, Helen saw at once that the building had been arranged by people who understood themes but not hips. The luncheon check-in line crossed directly through the cookbook table. The insurance networking coffee station stood beside the only broad bench. The restroom sign pointed toward the gift shop because someone had hung it backward. The family sing-along stage could be heard clearly from the luncheon room. A decorative wagon full of gourds had been placed exactly where older adults needed to turn. The cider cups were on one side of the hall and the cider on the other. And in the middle of all that, a silent auction basket shaped like a giant apple blocked half the opening to the East Hall. No, said Helen. Bonnie, coffee, cups, and everybody already trying not to lose patience. Walter, tables, wheels, wagons, and whatever else you distrust on site. Eloise, labels, lines, and lunch. Spencer, stop smiling like an apology and hand me the floor map. That first half hour changed the whole day. Bonnie Ray moved the coffee cups beside the coffee, the cream where actual wrists could reach it, and the napkins to both ends of the table because hands do not form a committee before landing. She also quietly reclaimed the bench from the insurance brochures and gave it back to the seniors, which is what civilization is for. Walter inspected the luncheon tables, corrected one short leg with a folded square of cardboard from a cookbook box, rolled the decorative wagon away from the main turn, and muttered that any object whose sole purpose was to be cute should not interfere with urinary urgency. Eloise took a marker and rewrote the food cards, so that instead of saying things like Harvest Comfort Bake, they admitted the truth: turkey casserole, ham biscuits, chicken salad, sweet potato bake, contains walnuts. Her honesty was loved immediately. Helen herself reversed the restroom sign, widened the path by the East Hall, and moved the giant apple basket farther from the doorway because raffles should not physically threaten the people funding them. The first seniors inside visibly relaxed. The first cookbook ladies stopped colliding with the luncheon crowd. The insurance men drifted toward their own side like ducks corrected by weather. How do you all know what to fix first? Spencer asked. Helen looked at him kindly. Because places tell the truth. You just have to stop decorating over it. For a brief and wonderful span, the event almost behaved. Seniors sat down. Cider reached cups. The cookbook swap hummed along. The scarecrow judges made notes in a civilized tone. The children gathered by the hay bale stage instead of running through the luncheon line. Then the family sing-along began early. No one had warned the luncheon volunteers. No one had warned the cookbook ladies. And no one had apparently told the guitarists that the walls between Hall A and Hall B were made of old optimism and decorative molding. One moment, an elderly man in a tan blazer was ladling vegetable soup into a paper bowl. The next moment, a chorus of children hit the first round of Old MacDonald at a volume suitable for emergency livestock communication. The ladle shook. Two women startled. Someone dropped a spoon. "No," said Helen, already moving. She took the wireless microphone from a folding chair near the doorway and said, in the calm tone of a woman who had once stopped a hallway stampede with one sentence, "Singing remains wonderful. Soup remains hot. We will not combine them." The room cracked open laughing. The guitarist, to his credit, stopped at once. Spencer moved the sing-along farther down the hallway and closed the dividing doors. The soup survived. "There," said Walter. "That is what a door is for. It should have settled after that. It did not, because the scarecrow judges had been promised a display lane on the lawn, and someone decided it would be festive to have the children parade past the entries during the lunch break. The parade route, naturally, ran directly past the open side doors of the luncheon room, where trays of mini pies had just been set out for dessert. One child in a cow costume, one girl with glitter pumpkin wings, and one very determined little boy dressed as a cornstalk rounded the corner at speed. just as a gust of wind nudged the Dolly Parton scarecrow sideways into the path of the pie table. The room saw it all happen 1 inch at a time. "No," said half the luncheon hall. Walter caught the scarecrow frame. Bonnie Ray grabbed the tray of mini pies. Helen stopped the children with one raised palm and the phrase, "babies," not through the dessert. They froze like well-loved deer. The pie tray was saved. Dolly remained upright. The children were rerouted outside where costumes belonged. "That scarecrow," said Eloise, "has seen more danger than some people do in marriage." The whole room laughed. The laughter spread through the cookbook tent and out to the lawn. By then, everyone had begun taking cues from Helen and her friends, even if they had never heard their names. The insurance men asked Bonnie which hallway they were supposed to use. The cookbook ladies asked Eloise whether their raffle tickets went in the blue jar or the apple basket. A volunteer with a wagon of extra chairs asked Walter where to park them, without causing spiritual damage, which he appreciated. Helen no longer needed to explain who she was. She only needed to point. Then came the pickle. No one expected the pickle because there had been no pickle on the flyer. But one local deli, seeing a crowd and sensing promotion, had sent over a costumed mascot shaped like a giant smiling dill spear to advertise its new sandwich special. The mascot stood by the cookbook tent handing out coupons with the confidence of a man hidden inside green foam. Had he stayed there, no harm. Instead, he wandered toward the family sing-along because children are naturally pulled to poor judgment in costume. The giant pickle blocked the East Hall, turned to wave, and clipped the side of the silent auction apple basket, which rolled 3 inches toward the cider line. "Absolutely not," said Bonnie Ray, reaching it first. Walter caught the basket handle. Helen turned toward the mascot and said, "Sir, you are now too involved." The room howled. The pickle retreated. One old woman near the soup table had to sit down laughing. Spencer, who by then had become emotionally dependent on their existence, took the coupon bucket away from the pickle and reassigned him to the lawn, where he could do the least institutional harm. The funniest part of the whole day, however, belonged to the insurance mixer. Those men and women had begun the morning assuming the seniors would stay politely inside their own luncheon, but by noon, they had discovered that older women with good shoes and better instincts were the only reason the building still had functional corners. So the insurance host, a pleasant but deeply overconfident man named Terry, decided it would be charming to bridge the audiences by bringing his little hospitality cart of mini muffins and coffee into the luncheon room during dessert. The cart itself was narrow, chromed, and morally unfit for carpet seams. Helen saw it at once. "No," she said. Terry smiled like a man who had never yet been told no by pie. He pushed anyway. The front wheel caught the edge of the rug near the pie station. The coffee trembled. The muffins tilted. One blueberry muffin performed a small but clear attempt at freedom. "No," said Walter, louder now. He caught the cart. Bonnie took the coffee pot. Helen steadied the tray and looked at Terry the way one looks at a nephew who has confused energy with usefulness. "Hospitality," she said, "does not arrive on unstable wheels during dessert." The room applauded. Terry apologized. One old gentleman muttered, "That's a sentence I'd frame." After that, the event entered its golden phase. The lunch was saved, the sing-along was tamed, the scarecrows were judged, the insurance people learned to stand in their own lane, and the cookbook ladies started inviting the tax. No. Tax people here today started inviting the trailer folks? No, not here. They started inviting the children's parents to take leftover church bars before someone with ambition tried to stack them. The local newspaper reporter, who had come to photograph the scarecrow contest. They realized the better story was the quiet takeover by 4 older adults who knew what a room needed before the room itself did. She followed Helen with a notebook and eventually asked, "What would you say your title is today?" Helen looked around at the steadied tables, the properly placed cider, the de-escalated sing-along, the chastened pickle, and the rescued pie, then said, "Temporary breaks." That made the paper. Then came the rain. It was only a short autumn shower, nothing dramatic, but a sharp little wind-driven rain that sent the lawn crowd under the awnings all at once. The scarecrows had to be carried in. The cookbook ladies grabbed the raffle basket. The children with paper crowns ran for the porch. The giant pickle, slick with rain and now dangerously hopeful, tried to help by carrying a box of recipe cards through the side door just as the luncheon volunteers were clearing soup cups. There is a kind of public choreography that should never be tested indoors. The pickles slipped, the recipe cards flew, one scarecrow named Harvest Hank lost his hat, and the giant apple basket rotated 1/4 turn toward the foyer. "No," came the room in one voice. Walter caught the basket. Bonnie caught the recipe cards. Helen caught the volunteer carrying the soup stack. Eloise, who until then had simply been observing with the serene humor of a woman waiting for the exact right line, said, "That pickle has no home training." The room dissolved. Even the children laughed, especially the children. The rain passed. The scarecrows were lined under the back wall to dry. The pickle was retired from service entirely and placed beside the town welcome sign where he could only wave. The final absurdity belonged to the giant apple basket itself, because once it had been moved twice, steadied twice, and publicly blamed twice, somebody made the mistake of assuming it was now safe. It was not. It contained raffle slips for a quilt, local honey, handmade soap, and a porch lantern. And because it was festive, someone had tied 3 helium balloons to its handle. During the final cookbook exchange, one child chasing a paper leaf decoration brushed the balloon strings, the basket pivoted, and the whole display started drifting toward the cookbook table like a harvest-themed plot twist. "No," said Helen again, though by now the word sounded less like panic and more like a local ordinance. She planted one hand on the basket handle. Walter untangled the balloons. Bonnie rescued the nearby stack of church cookbooks, and Eloise took the microphone from the children's music stand and said, in the driest voice anyone had heard all day, "The raffle has become emotional." That line ended the room. The older adults laughed until they coughed. The children laughed because everyone else did. Even Spencer leaned against the wall laughing with the exhausted gratitude of a man who had survived himself. By 3 o'clock, the County Cultural Center no longer resembled a scheduling error. It resembled a genuine town celebration, and it worked only because 4 older adults had refused to let it humiliate itself. The Scarecrow winners were announced without incident. The cookbook exchange ended in recipe sharing and pie. The children's sing-along moved outside and stayed there. Terry from insurance sent over coffee the correct way, carried by hand, which was growth. Spencer asked Helen if she and her friends would consider sitting on a planning committee for next year. "Only if no one ever again puts a wagon in a restroom lane," said Walter. "And no more pickles in enclosed spaces," said Bonnie Ray. "No, Bonnie? Here, Loretta?" "No, it was Bonnie?" "Well, the room knew who meant it." "And honest labels," said Eloise. Helen added, "and no speeches before pie." Spencer agreed so fast, it was almost moving. The next morning, the Ashbury Falls Courier ran the story beneath a photograph of Helen holding the microphone, Walter bracing the apple basket, Bonnie Ray steadying the coffee. Though in this town, it would be whichever friend stood there. Eloise smiling near the food cards, and the giant pickle off in the background, looking like he had learned something the hard way. The headline read, "Senior guests save fall fare from pickles, pie panic, and excess enthusiasm." It was not wrong. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the cardigan lay folded over the chair, Helen stood at the bathroom sink and followed the same gentle routine she trusted every day. Cleanser, lukewarm water, soft towel, moisturizer, no drama. And as she smoothed the cream across her skin, she thought how much good skincare and good public order had in common. Neither improves with panic, neither wants to be bullied. Both respond better to patience, consistency, and a few thoughtful adjustments made before the whole thing tips sideways. So you cleanse gently, you protect the barrier, you reduce friction, you keep the coffee by the cups, the dogs away from the dessert, the pickles out of the building, and the people who know what they're doing somewhere near the center of the room. And when life turns one quiet senior luncheon into scarecrows, sing-alongs, insurance people,